Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Dr. Jay Wrigley is a functional medicine doctor with almost 30 years of experience of healing patients with underlying hormonal imbalances through targeted diet, lifestyle, and pharmaceutical-grade supplementation protocols. Dr. Jay Wrigley's first focus is always on his recommended hormone optimization diet. However, he also believes strongly in pairing his diet with high quality, all natural nutritional supplementation to combat nutritional deficiencies created by the practices of our current agriculture system and to correct any hormonal imbalances caused by poor nutrition, illness, and stress. Dr. Wrigley takes a holistic approach to tackling the hormonal imbalances that impact weight gain, weight loss, female hormone imbalance, digestive disorders, and more. He utilizes low carbohydrate diets, such as ketogenic and carnivore diets, and nutritional supplementation as the foundation of his practice. He does videos consultations with patients worldwide. You can find Dr. Jay Wrigley on his website at www.drjwrigley.com or on social media at Hormone Diet Doc. Dr. Jay Wrigley, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thanks, Casey. I'm glad to be here, man. Looking forward to this.
Great to have you. I have followed your work for a very long time. It's such an honor to have you here. And based on your accent, you are in a different place in the world than where you came from. Tell us about your current setup.
Yeah, for sure. Born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina, and that's been home for most of my years, except for my medical training, which led me out to the West Coast, and then my residency in Boulder, Colorado. But after that, moved back and opened up a clinic in Charlotte called the Art of Living Center and practiced for 23 years, I believe, there. And so I'm a Southern boy who found that I have a particular niche of clientele that I enjoy working with, that I feel like I know a whole lot about, that led me to build out an online practice. And it worked out pretty well. And so now I travel a good bit. And at the present time, I'm down in the Dominican Republic, really enjoying living here. And things are going good.
That's great. Yeah, just based on your shirt, it looks like it's a very tropical shirt in a nice location. That sounds great. What are some things about the Dominican Republic that surprised you when you moved there?
Oh, so many things. One is the cost of living is ridiculously affordable. Not necessarily what I was, mainly interested in, but what a beautiful Caribbean country that, your needs are so little down here. The temperature stays the same pretty much all year round. So you need shorts and shirts, and you don't need air conditioning, and you don't need so many things that, I found myself needing back at home. So that just eliminates a lot of stuff that you don't need to own or need to deal with. And that makes it really enjoyable for sure.
That's awesome.
And then some other things would be the things that I often, me and my partner Heidi, we laugh about, but we forget about it too often, is that when you come down to somewhere like the Dominican Republic and you remember back at home how hard and effort-wise that people put into shopping for things like really good quality free-range chicken eggs or something like that. You come down here and there's no such thing as a chicken that is anything but a free scavenger, free range chicken with the brightest orange yolks you've ever seen. So some of the things that, we even take for granted and they're dirt cheap. And so when I see people back home, commenting all the time about sometimes we're paying, $11 for a carton of really good quality eggs. And I'm just going, wow, I pay 6 pesos, which would be, what would that even be, 10 cents? Whatever. I can buy 50 eggs at a time of the best quality free range chicken eggs for hardly anything at all. And it's because that's all that they have to offer. And those have been some fun things to find out, is that food down here is not manipulated. And a lot of it is like, it's a double-edged sword. It's like, it's still partly a third world country. So they don't have the resources to bring in things like factory farming of animal products. And they don't have the resources to even bring in, a lot of the pesticides and herbicides and things like that to grow their vegetables with. So pretty much everything that is available for you to eat down here is just real food that's been non-tainted and the way that humans are supposed to eat it. And it makes a big difference.
Wow, that is absolutely wonderful. Look, I think I've watched the movie Blow with Johnny Depp enough time to
Yeah,
like understand the drug trade. So let's get a plane. Let's start traveling back and forth to Dominican Republic and sell eggs on the black market. We could be millionaires.
absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
amazing. Wow. I've also heard about the Dominican Republic that if we took like our very best all-star baseball team, little league team down to the Dominican Republic, these kids would just crush us in baseball.
Crush them. Crush them. I
That's
mean,
amazing.
just crush them. I mean, any neighborhood that has a baseball field on any Friday night, you can go watch people that that are heading towards the MLB. I mean, it's just fascinating how talented. But again, there's a little manipulation there too, where the world knows this now. So they're sending scouts down here and talking their parents into signing contracts when they're 4 years old and saying, listen, if you'll stick with me, then, I'll try to get you to the majors and then you pay me a certain percentage. So it's there's a little bit of that going on, but the talent is just like nowhere else I've ever seen. It's just
That's
amazing.
amazing. What a cool place. I'm so glad you get to
Yeah, it's a
have
cool
that
place.
experience. That's great. Oh, that's awesome. Tell us how you got interested in health. Did you always know you wanted to be a medical doctor?
No, I didn't always know I wanted to be a medical doctor. What I found out in my junior year of college as a history major was I'm going to have about two choices as a job. That is to be a teacher or to work as a historian in some kind of museum or something like that. And I was like, wow, I didn't really pay attention to this at all. And then a number of things happened that beyond that led me to like, I want to get really serious about what do I want to do. And met a few people that really kind of engaged me in this kind of stuff. And then it led to a lot of soul searching and a lot of travel. I spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia in between college and grad school, kind of trying to do the old find yourself kind of thing like that. But it had a big impact on me to watch the way that healthcare was addressed in especially Eastern Asia, Southeastern Asia, of like, it's about nurturing someone back to health. It's not about treating symptoms to make those go away so that a person can manage their disease or dysfunction with pharmaceutical medication. So that was a big one for me. And there was an eye opener for me to watch people actually work on rebuilding their health using natural substances, whether it be diet or herbs or nutritional supplementation or many other things, and in combination sometimes with Western medicine. But the focus was on, if you're not well, then the approach should be rebuilding your health, not let's treat your blood pressure and make it go down with something that's not addressing the root cause of that at all. And so that was appealing to me. And I kind of like took that and went, okay, that's something I want to look into for sure.
Yeah. You described your residency in Boulder, Colorado. What was that like?
Boulder, it was a very alternative hippie town, so to speak. Now, maybe not so much so, maybe more yuppie kind of stuff. But Boulder was a great place to go and learn additional work in the field of people that were wanting to sidestep the allopathic kind of version of medicine and to look at what were the possibilities around utilizing lifestyle of diet, exercise, nutrition, and these types of things to deal with any type of disorder, especially chronic disorders that, that seem to be a manifestation of a poor lifestyle for a long period of time of eating crap and all this kind of stuff. So Boulder was a good place to be for a period of time to learn, an additional part of what I wanted to learn. And then, but I don't think that I would want to live there anymore. I think it's gotten to be the point where it doesn't give you a lot of freedom to really get the information to the people that really need it. The people that really need it are the people that don't get to live in somewhere, that's already so health oriented and so organically, holistically health oriented. So it was a great experience, but that was a one and done, and I was ready to go teach some people who didn't know much about this, what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah. So you mentioned the allopathic medical system, and so often we hear that it's so difficult to practice in that system and be able to help people with some of those lifestyle factors that you've already mentioned. How were you able to do that?
Well, I was able to do that because I just totally decided that I was not interested in being under the umbrella of what it was that would prevent me from being able to do that. And what I mean by that, Casey, is that most medical doctors in the world today find themselves coming out of medical school, and the typical approach is you are either going to go work in a hospital, or you are going to go work in a clinic that maybe you were recruited by of another group of doctors who are running their private practice and want to expand and things like that, that is also basically owned by a hospital administration of some type. And what happens there is there's something called the acceptance standard of care practice in medicine. And that is basically comes dictated through both this conglomeration of the AMA with the pharmaceutical companies, with the hospital administration or whatnot. And they come up with these, if a person has X, Y, and Z, and their blood work has 2 out of 5 of these things, then the accepted practice is the prescription of this medicine, and this medicine. So these doctors find themselves that if they're already in that type of group or under that umbrella, and you do something to move outside or make a different decision for one of your patients, you're sending up red flags everywhere, which eventually is going to come back to you, and they're going to they're first going to have a little sit down with you probably, and then the next thing is going to be a warning of you are failing to practice medicine based on the way that we see it done under the umbrella of the American Medical Association. So all of that. So to answer your question is, I decided right up front, I don't want anything to do with that. Now, that was a challenge, because in order to do that, what that means is that first you have to make a pretty bold decision that I'm not going to accept insurance for what it is that I do. Not that I wouldn't want to, or I don't think that insurance is a good idea for most people or something like that. The problem with it is that first of all, the insurance company is going to guide the doctor on what it is, what tests he can run, because they're going to base it on what they're going to pay for, and what medicines they're going to prescribe, because it's going to be something that they're going to be, have to be responsible for, and covering the cost of that and kind of stuff like that. So when you don't accept medical care or medical insurance, then you're basically saying that here's what I offer. I offer something different in the fact that straight up forward, this is going to be about you becoming self-reliant in your own healthcare. This is going to be we're going to partner together and work on what's the best approach to get you back to wellness. And we are going to eliminate that, again, that whole process of that you don't get to just have all of this paid for with no responsibility on your part. Because a lot of that is, and you see this, we see this every day. I mean, most people are good people. I believe that. But there are people who truly believe, and it dumbfounds me, that they can go out and do whatever they want to do. They can smoke cigarettes, they can drink too much, they can eat McDonald's and processed food all day long. And when they get their first diagnosis of they just had a heart attack, then they believe that the medical system should take care of all of that problem, including the, cardiothoracic surgery, the stents put in, the medications that they'll need to be on for years and years and years, as far as blood thinners or whatnot, and running up a tally of anywhere from $100,000 to $150,000. And that's what the insurance company should just do. They should just get you out of that problem. And that didn't work for me. I'm not interested in working with that particular group of people. I want people who are looking for a way out of, how do I get my health back? And how do I do that in a way that doesn't really include, a bunch of synthetic medicines, or if I'm already on them, is their approach to establish wellness and begin to tailor back or get rid of these types of synthetic medicines and surgical procedures and stuff like that. So that's what I did. And again, like I said in the beginning, that's a tough road to hoe for a minute, because you get a lot of people who go, I don't think I can afford to work with you, which is a whole nother conversation of let's take a hard look at that. What is, for instance, I'll just throw, a couple of $1,000, if even that, to work with a functional medicine doctor over a 6-month period of time that establishes the foundation for health and wellness, and returns your vitality and hormonal balance and all this kind of stuff, as opposed to what's that going to look like if you end up with the heart attack. Because even if you do, and your insurance company picks up 80% of that, you're going to be left with about $25,000 out of your pocket that you've got to come up with. So maybe it's not that expensive, really.
Yeah, that is such a good point. And knowing, what deductibles are for people's insurance, and
Sure.
like you might be paying tens of thousands of dollars out of pocket anyway before insurance does anything. I was
Right.
listening to a podcast episode recently. I believe the guest was Callie Means. He was the guy who was the Coca-Cola kind of whistleblower who came out on Twitter not too long ago, and talked about their playbook of how they were able to, keep soda basically in the food stamp program and everything that they were doing. But one point that he made was, like, with car insurance, like with Progressive, for example, like they give you incentives to drive better. Like if you're hitting your brakes really hard or accelerating really quick, there's an incentive for you. You might pay a little bit less in your deductible if you're a good driver. And medical insurance, seemingly unlike any other type of insurance, does not work that way. And people don't understand that.
It's unfortunate, so bad, because they don't give you really much incentive for preventative health care anyway. And I understand a part of it, it's because that they don't really have a good marker on what it is that healthy means. So we, doctors who practice in kind of the space that I do, and there's a lot of them now, are, privileged through their own study and due diligence and stuff like that to recognize that, what we use as standard levels of health don't really make a whole lot of sense. You go to your GP and you get a metabolic profile run, which includes things like your glucose levels and your electrolytes, your liver enzymes, and then they usually add a lipid panel on there. So you see your total cholesterol, and you see your LDL and your HDL and your triglycerides and whatnot. And what they have done is, if you look at the reference range for these numbers, they're huge. I mean, they're like really big reference ranges. And if you fall in somewhere in that reference range, then you get a check mark of a bill of health. And it's really kind of crazy, because it doesn't work that way at all. It's like there's so many things that figure into that, including the ratios of some of these numbers. And so two of them might be in reference range, but if you divide one into another and you don't get a ratio that would be something that would support metabolic health, that's a problem. But you're not going to get told that. You're going to get told things like, you're doing fine, there's no problem here whatsoever. And it's a poor practice of medicine. So therefore, it leads to that kind of issue that we're talking about, where, our measures of what true health is like are not good. And that's just the way it is right now.
Yeah, wow. So well explained. I love that. Metabolic health. In your experience, this is going to be a very general question, so really hard to answer this specifically, but in your opinion, in your experience, changing lifestyle factors to improve metabolic health, what kind of percentage can you make somebody get better just from changing those things without medications, without prescriptions? Like, are we talking like you can get 20% better, or are we talking that you can get like 95% better?
Well, I don't, that's a tough one, Casey, because I don't know. And I know exactly what you mean and where you're going with that. I do have to say that, using a number, I don't know that I would want to tag a number, but I would say it's closer to the latter that you said. It's closer to a big number, because metabolic health is really about your body understanding how it goes through the process of utilizing and partitioning nutrients that you take into your body and where they need to be delivered to. And a bigger part of that is understanding what happens with the hormonal response to the food that you eat, and how either proactive and health producing that can be, and how devastating that can be. And so I'll go a little bit further with that. So when we talk about metabolic health, we're really talking about that. One of the fascinating things about the humans is that we're one of the few who can, we have the ability to burn either glucose or fat for fuel. A lot of animals don't have this possibility, but through our evolutionary process, we learned how to be able to switch from sugar burners to fat burners and back and forth. Now, what has happened, metabolic health has gotten destroyed in the fact that by eating diets that are high in refined carbohydrates, way too much of these processed industrialized seed oils like canola and whatnot, high sugary foods, all of this kind of stuff, our bodies have, for most people that I work with and most people that go to doctors, their body hasn't been in remembrance of what it's like to have to use its own body fat for fuel for maybe forever. So they're complete sugar burners. That's not very functional metabolically. This is why people have, how you can know somebody is not really adaptive metabolically is that if you can't go more than 4 or 5 hours without eating food, because you get all kinds of symptoms of not just hunger, but you get shaky, dizzy, feeling like, things are off and I need food. That's a clear sign that you don't have real metabolic health, because if you did, your body would be able to switch over and go, okay, I don't have enough glucose in my blood to be able to utilize that for the energy my brain needs and everything else needs. So therefore, what I could do is I could just start breaking down these free fatty acids in my adipose tissue, which is fat tissue, or triglycerides, whatever. And I can make ketones out of that. And that is not only as good as glucose to run most of the body functions on, it's superior for some functions of the body, like brain function, right? So people should be able to not have that big of problem with skipping a meal, but so many people do. So when you, again, I'm going to try to trace this back around to what your original question was, and that is this: if you get somebody moving in a direction of understanding how you can structure your diet or way of eating that keeps the ability to turn the foods that you eat into glucose quickly or into sugar quickly, and prioritize more things like protein and really good healthy fats in your diet. What you do is you begin to reset this whole clock and this motion of your body being able to become what we call fat adapted. And fat adapted means that at any given time, if your body feels like it needs nutrition or energy that it doesn't have because you haven't eaten for a little bit of time, it can quickly turn on this process and produce ketones. And these ketones they're like rocket fuel. And so what we do when we're trying to like correct metabolic dysfunction is to move people to at least spend a period of their time in what we would call a ketotic or a state of ketosis, where you have these things readily available to be able to use. Now, that's also you're using your own body fat for fuel. So people end up getting leaner. People begin to think clearer. People begin to have a lot of health problems like, clear up, like inflammatory things, autoimmune problems and things like that. So yeah, you can turn metabolic dysfunction pretty much completely around. Now, there will be some exceptions to that. Type 1 diabetes, where you don't have the ability to produce insulin at all. So you're always going to need to take exogenous insulin through an injection, usually. That's never going to change. Now, we also have seen some people who have rearranged their diet low enough carbohydrate that they hardly need any of it anymore, but they'll never truly get off of it. So that person, unfortunately, genetically was set up for that type of thing. But other things that we're plagued with in this world today, like type 2 diabetes, obesity, inflammatory disorders, cardiovascular disease because of inflammation in the vessels of the arteries and things like that, that are all related to these problems with insulin and glucose or whatnot, these are reversible. And it's dumbfounding that the science has not caught up with the research that's already been done to prove that these things are reversible problems. You can reverse type 2 diabetes by shutting down the amount of insulin that your body produces and make it have to use your own body fat for fuel. You can basically clear this whole thing up and put it into remission. Now, the reason that you're not hearing a whole lot about that, or as much as that we should, comes down to things like this. We live in a world today that's profit driven, and the things that really make the biggest difference that we're seeing today are, unfortunately or fortunately, you can go either way on that, they are not patentable by a pharmaceutical company. So if you have a natural product that could help your body regulate your insulin production better or something like that, you're never going to hear Merck or Pfizer or anybody else talk about this, because they have the inability to go out and patent a medicine that came from just basically a natural product like a plant or whatever. So that's, we work with that, and then we work with a lot of political stuff and all that kind of stuff. But I don't want to like turn it on the negative side. I want people to realize that there's a real empowerment to taking care of your health, getting the right information, maybe for a period of time, working with a doc or a coach who can get you on the right pathway to straighten out things like metabolic dysfunction, inflammation, autoimmune disorders, chronic inflammation in joints and things like osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis and whatnot. There is so much that can be done, and so much of it starts with just lifestyle. And so we need to do that more. And yet again, I get that there's, based on the umbrella that we were talking about, not a lot of incentive in preventative medicine these days, but there should be, because the quality of life that you want to have and how much that would drive down the expense of healthcare and how much inexpensive it would be to the person actually doing this, rather than finding themselves in a challenge that gets really, really expensive. All right, that's a lot of chitter chat, but
That was a clinic. I love that. That was a clinic. That was so well explained. If somebody could really take in what you just talked about for the last 10 minutes, I think they would really understand the issues and the things that you were describing that have changed in the diet, the seed oils, the sugar, the grains. Those are very, very, very recent inventions. No wonder you can't go to the mall and like hardly even find somebody that is obviously metabolically healthy, because we've changed all of those foods so
right.
recently, and now it's a huge problem. And I'm thinking about the example that you gave earlier where, like, yeah, it's expensive to pay a doctor to sort out some of your issues and deal with the things metabolically ahead of time. You mentioned also being very expensive having a heart attack and you have to pay out of pocket. Well, the thing is, like, you could still pay out of pocket that many thousands of dollars and maybe like fix the acute problem, but you're still going to have issues. Like, you're going to hit that same deductible the year later, the year later, the year later.
Sure.
By contrast of what you described, you could go to the right person, get everything sorted out, and really like not need to pay anybody forever, potentially.
Potentially. And, avoid and avoid being a statistic. And, some of the statistics that just blow my mind is, one of them is something like 90% of people living in the US that are over 65 years old are on between 6 and 11 prescription medicines. Like, that's just stupid. I mean, and excuse that I get passionate about this, and I'm like, but I'm done with that. It's like, to have 6 to 11 of those orange colored pill bottles in your medicine cabinet, and this is the patch that your doctor has come up with to put you on so that you keep everything in somewhat of a non-crisis mode, which we don't even know that it does that. At best, it blocks maybe some symptomology and some things like that. But taking 6 to 11 medicines, and people just think this is normal now. They just think that, well, that's, that's just normal. I watched my parents at that age, or my grandparents at that age, or whatever, and that's just what they do. They take 10 medicines a day. That is not normal in any way at all, and not the way to approach anything about this. So there's that.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's so well explained. I love that you went there with that. You talk about helping people find their edge, and you do that by helping people, as we mentioned in the introduction, optimize their hormones. What kinds of issues are you commonly dealing with? What kinds of hormonal imbalances are you seeing very commonly these days?
Um, wow, there's a bunch. I would say that, let me break that down into a couple of different sides. One is, I deal a lot with women who are in their late 40s to, early 60s, let's say, and who are somewhere in this process of going through what we call this perimenopause into post-menopause situation, right? So what that means, to a layperson, to try to explain that, is really all this means is that this is not a disease or a dysfunction. This is This is a woman's ovaries saying, I don't really feel like having babies anymore. We don't really support that. We don't have the optimal energy and structure or whatever to have babies. So we're going to begin declining the hormones that would be related to supporting a pregnancy and some other things like that. So there's three primary in a woman. Let's just take an example. A 52-year-old woman is, at that period of time, her three primary hormones of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, which we think of as a male hormone, but women need testosterone too, not nearly as much as a male needs, but it's a huge participant in health for a woman. So at a 52-year-old woman, these three hormones have come pretty much crashing down. Now, each one of those hormones has a metabolic effect in and of itself. They're part of, in a younger age female, each one of these hormones has its certain part to play in keeping up a really high functioning metabolism, including ovarian health and into things like adrenal and thyroid health or whatnot. So these hormones begin to decline. And what you watch is the typical woman will put on somewhere between 10 to 15 pounds from her mid 40s to her early 50s without changing anything about her lifestyle at all, and cannot figure this out. And this is solely because that she has lost part of her metabolism through the declining of these hormones. Now, there's many ways to deal with this. Their diet is a huge one. The diet has to shift in a direction for a woman like that in a certain way. And I won't get into all the details of that. I can't do that right now. But also something's got to be done about supporting these pathways of these hormones to bring them up or nudge them up a little bit. Now, you can do that through nutritional supplementation. You can do that through good quality botanical medicines. And in a fair amount of cases, it's gotten to the point where you actually need to use some bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. And what I mean by that, for those that are listening who might not be sure what that is, this is the cleanest and safest way that you can actually put someone on something that could be very beneficial to you. Because when we say bioidentical, what it means is this is the exact same, let's say, progesterone that your body has produced all its life. So when you take it, and it's derived from a natural source usually like the Mexican wild yam, or what's called the diascaria plant, can be you can take the raw material out of that, make one little conversion to it, and turn it into straight USP progesterone. Now, you give this to a woman, her body understands that this is the exact same progesterone that her body has made all her life, and it works fantastically. The other side of that is, in the allopathic model of medicine, is doctors will often prescribe things that they will term progesterone, but they're not at all. There's something called a progestin. It's a synthetically derived, made in a laboratory, something to mimic the action of progesterone for a female. And the body absolutely knows that this was never created in its body, or never really seen anything like this. And some of it will work on a couple of things, and then there will be like 19 things that progesterone does that there's no way a progesterone's ever going to do, and it's just going to cause a bunch of problems. So it's a long way to tell that, say that hormonal health makes such a huge difference. And if you begin to do things like rearrange your diet for metabolic health, and then take care of your hormones by supporting optimal function of things where you could nudge your own levels of hormones up a little bit, maybe using, again, nutritional supplementation, glandulars, whatever, or some bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, which is going to need to come from, a doctor like myself or somebody else, because this is not something you're going to go find over the counter at a health food store. But again, taking care of metabolic health takes care of so many issues that would be around not just women, but, people from midlife, let's just make that up at 45 to 47 up to 60 years old, who begin to find that, wow, it's a lot easier to gain weight than ever before and a lot harder to lose weight. It's my sleep is not as good as it used to be. My vitality is not as good as it used to be. My cognitive thinking and clarity of mind, not nearly as good as it used to be. I feel like my skin's getting a little bit more dry and my hair's getting a little bit more coarse. I'm not as strong or able to put on muscle mass as I used to be able to do. And I'm moving into what we call sarcopenia, where the muscles are getting weaker and weaker. And that's disrupting the ratio, the body composition of muscle to fat tissue or whatnot. All of these things are byproducts of either the decline of the hormones in our body, or the fact that we live in an environment now where there are so many things called endocrine disruptors. These are things that they put into our food supply, the things that they allow farmers to spray on their plants, the things that they put into plastic water bottles to put your water in, and on and on and on. There's hundreds and hundreds of different products where these chemicals they've used to manufacture these, what they do is they go in and they bind these receptor sites on your cells where your hormones are supposed to plug in and tell that cell exactly what to do, but they can't get there because the receptor site's bound up by the synthetic garbage endocrine disruptor that came from eating too much processed soy and drinking stuff out of material that just is. So all of that's going on, right? So what you have to do is you have to piece all of this together for each individual and go, okay, based on my 30 years of experience, I can see that here would be a common one. So this woman is declining in progesterone, but her estrogen has kind of stayed steady. What this has done is since estrogen and thyroid hormone that sits in the base of your throat, your thyroid gland, that runs your ability to get oxygen into your tissue, which stokes your mitochondria for your metabolism to burn fat. So estrogen and thyroid are competing against each other for these receptor cycles. But because progesterone has fallen so low and it can't antagonize estrogen anymore, estrogen now is winning this battle most of the time at the receptor site level. So thyroid hormone's floating around in the bloodstream, but it can't get into the cell. So the doctor draws the blood, looks at the blood, it says, oh, you've got plenty of thyroid hormone in your blood. Your thyroid's fine, but it's not getting into the cell. Meanwhile, they're developing all these hypothyroid symptoms like dry hair, skin, and nails, gaining weight, can't sleep well through the night, short-term memory recall is all messed up, and all of these things. That's the nature of what I deal with on a daily basis.
Wow. Wow. That's also very well explained. For somebody who is hearing you say that and talking about hormones and adding hormones, taking them exogenously, they might be thinking like, well, wait a second. I thought that taking exogenous hormones is going to cause cancer based on a really poor study that was done. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the problem with that is hormones. Okay. It's like a thesis in and of itself, but let's try to simplify this and say that where the problem with that started was that, again, this was manipulation for being able to patent something. So the truth of the matter of again, we'll go back to use an example as a woman. A woman has 3 different estrogens in her body. They're called estrone, they're called estradiol, and they're called estriol. She's got one form of progesterone, and that is just progesterone, and then she's got one form of testosterone. Then you've got things like thyroid hormone, which is there's two, T4 and T3. That's thyroxine for T4, and that's triiodothyronine, which is T3. And I don't expect anybody to like really remember all of that, but there lays down kind of like a basis. Now, what happened is when they started to begin to develop taking horse urine, and what you can do with horse urine is you can extract from horse urine a byproduct of estrogen metabolism, and then you can take it to a laboratory and you can create synthetic estradiol out of it. Now, again, like we were talking earlier, Casey, your body knows that this in no way is the estrogen that it's been accustomed to for the woman's first 50 years of her life at all. But it will have the ability to do some things, like it'll turn hot flashes off. And that's the reason a lot of women go on, hormone replacement therapy, because they get hot flashes and night sweats or whatnot. So it does a pretty good job at that. The price that you pay for that is substantial, because if you have any metastatic cells growing in your body, a synthetically derived estrogen, especially from an equine source, is like throwing gasoline on a fire. So if you've got 4 cells that have already reproduced cancerous cells, and you bathe your body by taking a bunch of equine estradiol, you're going to likely feed that all that it needs to rapidly just turn over its cell turnover rate and turn into tumors and all this kind of stuff. Now, the same doesn't hold true for bioidentical hormone, because it doesn't work that way. That the same estrogens and progesterones and things like that that the female body produces on its own do not cause those problems. And there are still doctors, and I can understand why, where they will tell breast cancer patients things like you should never have anything to do with any type of hormone replacement based on your diagnosis of you had a type 2 metastatic breast cancer disorder or something like that. I can understand that a little bit. What I feel like it is that's weak. That's weak for any doctor to say that. That means you haven't done your education very well. Because if you had, and you really understood how you can use hormones for the purpose of rebuilding immune function and even shutting down tumor growth, you would realize that there's a very, very strong role for some of this bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, even with a woman who has breast cancer, as an adjunct therapy to treat that breast cancer. But that's a lot, and probably bigger than the audience that we have today. So I'm going to kind of leave it at that. But again, it goes back to just hormonal balance is, something that I guess I should touch on this before we kind of close this up. Casey, is this where it is it's not about like that hormones are necessary, the answer, and all I want to do is to give them to people at all. I'd rather do most of my work through diet, nutritional supplementation, maybe botanicals, and a little bit of bio-HRT when needed. But where I was going to go with that is one of the reasons that this is such a big topic now is because of our life expectancy. Now, when women and men were living to only 55 years old, and women maybe 58 years old or something like this, this wasn't like this wasn't a big deal, and nobody had done, a tremendous amount of research on it anyway. The thing about hormones now and how this plays into our lives now is if you're going to live to 85 to 90 years old and maybe longer, it's all about quality of life. And your quality of life is going to have a whole lot to do with your hormonal balance. So if there's something that a male at 60 can do in a natural fashion that gives him a little advantage in bumping up his testosterone levels a little bit, it's going to make a world of a difference in things like youthfulness, vitality, sleep, motivation, ability to put on muscle mass, faster ability to burn fat tissue, all this kind of stuff. So, a lot of this is about getting an edge, that you brought up early in the conversation. And that what that edge is has a lot to do with that. If you want to be like a vibrant 80-year-old person, you're going to need to, or not need to, but why not utilize some of the tools that we know of now, such as diet, keeping insulin low, keeping seed oils, grain, and sugar out of your diet, proper supplementation to keep your thyroid and adrenal glands strong, maybe a little bit of bio HRT to support a minimal dosage of something that gives you those youthful hormones back in a way that's not going to be harmful to you at all, but it's going to show up as a big win. Yeah, that's really, yeah, that's the work for me now, and I'm excited about doing it.
I can tell, man. I can tell you're super excited about it. I love it. No, that's great. My mind has totally been changed about this in recent years. I always just thought taking, any kind of hormone exogenously would not be a great way to go about things, and that you should address everything with lifestyle. And all of the people that I know that are taking those hormones, they would they would punch me in the throat if I tried to take away some of those things from them. Their quality of life, like you said, is just so much greater. And I would just love to ask you also, I know you work primarily with women, but you also
Yeah,
work with men. And
absolutely.
when we're thinking about men and hormones, is testosterone really like the only thing we should really be worried about? Are there other things that we need to worry about? Or is it really primarily for men, it's testosterone?
Um, well, just want to make sure that I kind of get ahead of this question, because it's kind of two parts. Okay, so it's kind of like, in a sense, testosterone would be the major conversation around a middle-aged to maybe past middle-aged male, and keeping that edge, whatever. But here's where I'm going to start this little bit of this conversation. It's not just about testosterone. It's about what is your body doing with its own testosterone. So two of the big problems that men run into is that there are enzymes in our body that will convert our hormones into other hormones or metabolites of hormones. So two examples that I see every day in men is there's something called aromatase. And an aromatase is an enzyme in the body that can and will convert testosterone into estrogen. So we see a lot of men nowadays, and this is really primarily through diet and being sedentary and stuff like that, who end up through eating a poor diet and probably way too much soy in their diet and processed junk food and seed oils, that they produce a lot of this aromatase. And so what's happening is they're taking all of their testosterone, they're converting it into estrogen. And these are the men that you see who are, just flabby. They're growing man boobs. That's because of all the estrogen that's being converted from their testosterone, which a man does not want to happen, right? So it's back to testosterone. Yeah, it's mainly what we're talking about, but it's not just about your level of testosterone. It's, are you preventing it from converting to estrogen? You need to be aware of making sure you're not doing that, and how you make sure that doesn't happen. Then there's the other side of that. There's another enzyme in the body called 5-alpha reductase. This is what takes your testosterone as a male and converts it into something that's called dihydrotestosterone. Dihydrotestosterone is the major reason why you see men with male pattern baldness lose their hair follicles and their hair fall out. It also is hugely a part of any type of prostate issues, whether it be benign prostate hypertrophy or whether it be actually, prostate cancers, because they're massively converting their testosterone into a metabolite of this that has a bunch of negative effects for your body. So you have to be maintaining, how am I making sure that I am not converting my testosterone into DHT? Now, that being said, so it's a lot about testosterone. Now, there are some other hormones that are, definitely the male needs to be keeping their cortisol levels down. If they're very stressed and all that kind of stuff, and they're making way too much cortisol, which is setting off inflammation, preventing them from burning fat, preventing them from making lean muscle mass gains and things like that. That comes into play a lot. So cortisol would be a big one that comes in there too. So yeah, I mean, there are other ones. Big piece of it's testosterone.
Yeah. Wow. Well, this is why I'm just so grateful for people like you in the world who can break this stuff down and can really take this on one case at a time, because there's not one simple answer. As much as I just want to like go around and say like, oh, just eat carnivore and get your strength training in, you're going to be fine. And like, I really would love for that to be true. And it certainly helps for a lot of people, but there's so much more to it. And so for you to be able to go into those details and explain everything, and also say like, look, like these are how the systems work. I'm not sure how an individual is going to handle some of these different things. They need to work with a practitioner like you. And so it's so wonderful that people can reach out. You have an online practice. People can reach out to you from all over the world. Is that right?
It is. Yeah. And people can get in touch with me, through social media or my website, and look at the various types of consultations that I do and stuff like that. But to your point, what you're really saying, Casey, is, I think that we all wish it must be some kind of inherent like human desire or whatnot. We want there to be this way, that this is the way. And I've been chasing this for so many years, probably before you were born, wanting there to be this way. And so we look at something like, whether it started out as paleo and then keto and then carnivore and whatever, all of these are hugely useful tools. The problem is that a lot of people don't have enough information of what to look for, of whether or not this is your optimal diet. Because things like this, if just comes off the top of my mind. Usually if I'm dealing with someone with a pretty severe autoimmune disorder, that might be something from like lupus or celiac disease, or could be Crohn's, could be rheumatoid arthritis, could be a number of different things. What I find extremely useful is to put this person, at least for a period of time, on a strictly carnivore diet. It has an amazing ability to shut down inflammation, and retarget your metabolism and your cellular structure to it's not being offended by some of the things that we typically think that we should be able to eat. But if you really look at it, they were designed with a defense system because they don't want to be eaten. Meat's not like that. Meat doesn't have any defense system that goes, if you eat this, then you're going to have to deal with, how I didn't want you to eat this by, I've got a bunch of oxalates or a bunch of, this in it. So anyway, the carnivore way of eating can be, a great starting approach. Now, for other people, like a woman, again, going through certain parts of late perimenopause, who's what we call estrogen dominant, there are phytochemicals in certain, foods, like the cruciferous vegetable family has things that are called indole 3-carbinol. Again, people, that's big. Go research it if you want to. Sulforaphane. These are things that come from broccoli and broccoli sprouts or whatnot. Tremendous ability for these things to bind up excess estrogen through the liver and clear them out and take a woman out of an estrogen dominant state and make her liver function better. That why would you not want to utilize these unless you show up with some kind of form of, you're plant intolerant or something like that. And then it goes on and on and on. So the truth of the matter is it's really about individuality. And that's hard work to do by yourself. So, but we all want it to be that way. We want there to be this, just if everybody ate this one diet, then everybody would be perfectly healthy, happy, cancer-free, live forever. And it doesn't really work out that way. Some people need to go way lower on plant food in their diet to the point of elimination. Some people actually need some plant food in their diet, but chosen specifically for like phytochemical reasons and not just because you like to eat vegetables. A lot of them might not be good for you at all, but there might be some therapeutic ones for you. So it's an individual thing, and that's why it is sometimes helpful to work with someone who can sit down and go, let me take your case, go through all of this. What are our goals? What have you been dealing with? And pick a starting point and go, we're going to build out your diet based on what's going to be the best for you metabolically, to lose any excess fat, to take care of hormonal balancing, all that kind of stuff.
I love that. Dr. Jay Wrigley, this has been a blast. I've learned so much from this conversation. I feel more, I guess, empowered that again, people can work with you one-on-one to get answers to some of these really tricky solutions. And listening to a podcast or listening to how somebody else addressed their issues is not necessarily going to work for everybody. And the importance of working with, a doctor or professional like you is just so high. I've just so much appreciated this conversation, the time you've taken to be with us today. Where can people go to find you and connect with you and your work, and also potentially work with you?
Okay, I mean, the best places to find me, well, certainly our main hub would be our website, which is drjwrigley.com. I spend the majority of my social media time on Twitter. That's where you will find me and the other doctors I play with, and our big followings and stuff like that. We also have Facebook, Instagram, probably a couple others I'm not thinking about right now. And every one of those is at Hormone Diet Doc. So you can plug that in. You're going to find us, all over social media. And yeah, I'd love to hear from any of you about comments or whether or not you have an interest in working with me. We have free discovery calls where if somebody wants to just pop on a Zoom with me for 10 minutes and kind of go, let's see if we're a good fit to work together. We welcome things like that. So, Casey, I appreciate it. I appreciate all that, just taking the time to have me on here. It's been very enjoyable.
Yeah, it's been totally enjoyable for me. Such an honor to host you. Dr. Jay Wrigley, thank you again so very much for all of your work and for taking time to be on our show today. We really, really appreciate you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Ciao.
And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.